Hello and welcome to another day at Live at 5. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining. If you'd like to join us on Zoom, you could do so Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. at Zoom meeting ID 694348057. You can join us back here in the studio, the Live at 5 studio. Otherwise, you're welcome to catch us on Facebook Live if you're not already doing so, or you can see all of our past episodes on the Jewish Experiences YouTube channel. And while you're there, why don't you just click like, subscribe, support, whatever the clicks, whatever the appropriate thing to do. Just use that mouse in favor of, in a favorable way. Click, click, click. I hope you are doing wonderful, as I said, and I hope you're just slowly but steadily increasing your joy. We know that today's the 4th of the month of Adar, and in the month of Adar, our sages say that as soon as you get into this month, you have to just start growing your joy, your simcha. When we get to Adar, simcha grows little by little, just grows and grows and grows. And so I heard actually a beautiful thought about that from one of our up-and-coming, popular Jewish inspiring voices, a rabbi from Israel. His name is Rabbi Elimelech Biederman, just known as Melech, which is the short form for Elimelech. He speaks only in Yiddish, and my Yiddish is not that good. Well, probably Yiddish and Hebrew, but it's so engaging to hear him speak. He has just a fantastic way about him. Everything he says is with joy. And even though I'm reading the subtitles and letting the Yiddish wash over me, I love it. So he says, the Talmud says to increase your joy in the month of Adar in a kind of a very odd way. It doesn't just say, since it's Adar, start being more and more and more besimcha. It doesn't say that. It says, in the same way that in the month of Av, we decrease our simcha, in the month of Adar, we increase our simcha. So what's exactly is the comparison? Just tell me, in Adar, we're happy. Get happy. Let's increase our simcha. Why does it compare it to the fact that in the month of Av, which is the tragic month, the month where the temple was destroyed, and over there we're diminishing our simcha? Why are you telling me just like we diminish our simcha in Av, we increase our simcha in Adar? What's the connection? So he said, that if you think for a second about what it would be like in the month of Av, if somebody were like making a big party and just walking around, just like, having an over the top good time all the time, you'd say, you know what? It is the month of Av. Maybe you want to just cut that back a little bit, calm down. Hello. It's inappropriate. And you'd probably call him out on it, maybe in a nice way, but you probably want to whisper in his ear or her ear. So too, he said, if you see somebody that's in the month of Adar and they're glum and they're depressed, and they're walking around like with a frown, you need to tell them. You need to whisper in their ear, pull him or her aside and say, hey, this is the month of Adar. Do you know? You can't be gloomy. You've got to be joyous, because that's just the way it's got to go. The Jewish people need joyousness, joyouskeit. And the reason that we have to have that is because this is a month where we are recognizing and remembering that the Jewish people survived difficult things. We've been through tough times, exiles, diaspora, persecution, anti-Semitism. And we've survived and we've lived through all of this stuff, and we've continued to make it till this very day. And we do so only because we have our Father in heaven who's looking out for us. I got a friend and a very lovely person who his English is not so good. He speaks Russian, thick. He speaks English with I was going to say he speaks Russian with a thick Russian accent. I'm sure his Russian is probably with the right accent. His English is with a thick Russian accent also, and but a very lovely person. And he says, and many years ago, I don't even know if he would even remember this, but he pointed out something fundamentally very true. And he said it in his very Russian accent. He said, no one love the Jewish people, just Hashem, no one, just Hashem. Like as if to say, we got no friends. We got plenty of detractors, plenty of critics, and plenty of folks who are just, who are waiting till they can catch us, in a vulnerable moment. But we got one friend. We just got one good friend. It was a good friend. We got a friend. We got a friend, our Father in heaven. Hashem loves the Jewish people, and he pulls our fat out of the fire. And that really is the holiday of Purim. And it's about being saved from our enemies by our dear beloved friend in heaven. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on the show today. We're planning over the next few weeks, 2 weeks as we get closer and closer to Purim, which is next Friday, the 26th of February. It's our Thursday night. We're going to go through on our way there and talk a little bit about Purim, read through the Megillah a little bit together, and try to get a better and better and better understanding of what the holiday means, why it's so special and so dear, why we're enjoying it so much. We started a little bit of that yesterday, and I encourage you to go back and watch yesterday's show for some of the first thoughts. Now, along those lines, we're not only joyous and celebrating and warming up and getting ready, but I wanted to just also mention something which completely escaped my. You just gotta hate that, you're about to do something super important, and then it's just gone. Just like a brain cloud that just goes right over, comes and goes. But I think I wanted to make mention of, no, didn't come back yet. I don't know. It's also one of the other things we're going to talk about this week's parsha is Parsha's Teruma, and Teruma is the first of 5 parshas in the latter half of the book of Exodus, in which we are actually talking about the construction of the tabernacle, the central edifice of the Jewish people. I'm going to talk about a little bit of that on today's show. We wanted to also wish a mazel tov to some of the folks in our community that have a mazel tov. Now, the one I'm thinking of at the moment is the Mailer family. Phil and Leah Mailer had in Chicago a grandchild born. Mazel tov to them and to all the local Mailers. And we also wanted to wish our condolences sent to the family of Jeff and Mindy Hecht. Jeff Hecht's, I believe, aunt passed away. I recently learned about that, so we're very sad for that loss. And ultimately, the Jewish people were hoping that we have no more losses. To enough is enough. We give a blessing to the world, that we would be. Oh, and I just remembered what I wanted to say. But first of all, we just want to give a blessing to the world that in the month of Adar, that we truly experience that ultimate final joy when, as the prophet told us, Hashem will wipe away all the tears and make death no more. Very beautiful prophetic vision of the future, or the time that's just happy. I'll tell you what I wanted to share that was I spaced a minute ago. It always comes back, thank God. There'll be that day when it won't come back. But so far, when you space something out, your mind is sort of in the back burner, thinking about it until it does. You do remember it. I read this interesting article about anti-Semitism. I thought it was very, very interesting and insightful. The author, who it was a column in the Guardian. It's always interesting to read about American news from a British newspaper. Very interesting. The Guardian. Anyway, this particular author was writing a little bit about the big topic of last week, Jewish space lasers. This was had to be the highlight of all the last week's shows. And but unfortunately, the point of view of the author was that as much as we might have laughed about Marjorie Taylor Greene's, the new congresswoman from Georgia, about her silly statements suggesting that maybe the forest fires of California in 2018 were started by Jewish space lasers. And we thought that was about the silliest thing we'd ever heard. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. However, the author's point, which was a little bit scary, was that unfortunately the reaction of some of the rest of her fellow party mates in the Republican Party and fellow congressmen and women was not necessarily to laugh quite as loudly as we would have liked. Kind of a strange thing. And then it became an article about anti-Semitism, and the author's theory about anti-Semitism, very interesting, I wanted to share, which is that his opinion was that anti-Semitism is little. I think it was her opinion. Her opinion was that anti-Semitism is a little bit different than we usually think of in terms of just general, misanthropy or racism or prejudice in general. Generally speaking, we talk about some type of prejudice against one particular group. So we tend to find is that prejudice contains a kind of a criticism. The author's opinion was that in a sense it's an attempt to punch down that group, to demonize a group, and to see them as being lower, less than. Less than we should respect, less than us. And that's typically the way we see racism manifest its ugliness. On the other hand, by contrast, the author wrote that that anti-Semitism you see as a prejudice tends to instead punch up the Jewish people to create a fear about them, that really they control, they run the show, they're in charge, we're to be afraid of them because they're so powerful. It's a very interesting, perhaps, contrast. I don't know. I will say this, although I'm not one for modern theories of anti-Semitism, which is not a modern phenomena. It's an old phenomena, and I like old theories. I don't like the new theories. The old theories about anti-Semitism, the very classical theories of anti-Semitism, if you've heard us discuss it on the show in previous episodes of Live at 5, talk about a very classical attitude and opinion, which is that it stems all the way back to the Jewish peoples receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. And in fact, the language, the name of Mount Sinai, Sinai itself, says the Talmud, is related to the word sino, which means hatred, which is that when the Jewish people accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai and became the people of the book, in a sense, there was a sino, there was an automatic hatred that accompanied that we will automatically experience as a kind of a natural divine force of nature that exists out there to, as it were to keep us on the straight and narrow. If we fall too far in either direction, then we'll be prompted to recall who we really are. And it's not, it could be seen. I was thinking to myself as I was reading this article, it could be seen by, I can understand how the author could see that anti-Semitism is different than other prejudices. I could see that. And I could also see how that along with anti-Semitism typically comes a criticism of the Jewish people, that we aren't lesser as much as more capable. We have potential. There's that people have to keep they believe in their erroneous way that they have what to worry about. They have nothing to worry about from us. That's not the case. But that we have potential, yes. And I think it goes back to the Hebrew national theory of anti-Semitism, which is we answer to a higher authority. The old Hebrew national theme, and that certainly is something which is a classical opinion of anti-Semitism, which is that we in our role obligated to be the bearers of God's Torah in the world. And this is our job, this is our role, this is our privilege and our obligation, that we will be the ones that will embody godliness, that we will live up. We won't be less. We'll rise to the expectations of God that He has for us, especially when it comes to our spirituality and our divine service. We will live up to those expectations, and it could be that we will have detractors and naysayers and critics, and we'll have those who will say, "Yeah, you think you're special?" And the answer is, we do think we're special. Yes, not because we're better, but because we have a lofty task, and we're going to strive hard to reach it, and it's a very worthwhile task. And I always like to point out that we're not an elitist people, because we welcome converts. Anyone who wants to join the Jewish people is welcome, and that doesn't mean that means that we're not an exclusive type of elitist type of group. We just work hard at our task, and we have a very valuable task. Now, I think that that's a little more of a time-honored perspective on anti-Semitism, and it's certainly very thematically appropriate when we talk about Purim in the month of Adar, because all of Jewish holidays, as we know, have basically one theme and one theme only, which is They tried to kill us. God saved us. Let's eat. And Purim is no different. It's one of those great holidays. They tried to kill us. God saved us. Let's eat. Here comes the holiday, right? So we talk about, we have detractors. We have enemies. And we still do. It ain't over. The game ain't over. The Jewish history isn't over. Human history isn't over. And we are still at it. And we're still trying to come to bring human history and the Jewish people to the end of our tasked role, that we should achieve it. We should accomplish it. We should finally, fully, completely, and sufficiently embody godliness as a society and as a culture. And that's of course, the Jewish people is made up of a lot of individuals. So each of us as individuals have our role to play, and we have our work cut out for us, and we have a lot to do. And meanwhile, we come to a holiday like Purim, and we're celebrating the fact that ultimately God's got our back. And even if we fall short, and even if things look grim, and even if we go through difficult times, and we'll have naysayers, detractors, and anti-Semites, we're going to have that. And God's never going to let us go. That's the holiday, all the holidays. Now, so I've got my handy little Megillus Esther with the green screen here. See, look at that. It's the camera thinks that's a green screen moment there. But I picked it up yesterday, and we started looking at it, and I want to read or at least discuss a little bit of it at a time. Now, again, just from yesterday, we talked about the goal of reading the story of the Megillah, which we're going to do on Purim twice. We read the mitzvah of reading the Megillah on Purim happens twice, once in the evening and once during the day. In the evening this year will be next Thursday night, the 25th of February. And in the day will be that Friday day. So if you can, and it's appropriate, if you're well and you're able to, and you have an opportunity to go to hear the Megillah read in person. It's not one of those things that can really be accomplished properly over Zoom. So it might be if you can't, have it read for you in person, or read it in person from a kosher Megillah scroll. So it's better to hear it than not hear it. But the reality is that the mitzvah to be performed in the way that it has been done for millennia is to be done in person, and you actually need a kosher Megillah scroll in front of you. Actually, had somebody call me today and say, where can I get my hands on a kosher Megillah scroll? And those things could cost, will cost thousands of dollars potentially. I mean, it's handwritten. It's a long scroll, and it stretches out for, how many feet, and it's all personally handwritten by an expert scribe in Hebrew. And they're not inexpensive. It takes a long time to do it, and that person's time is worth money, and there's material. So you're talking about a couple $1,000 investment. It would be great to have one. I don't personally. The Jewish Experience, I don't think, owns a Megillah. So if anyone wants to donate one, we'll be happy to hear from you. But meanwhile, we've got this great little book, which we'll have to do in the meantime, and we're going to go through it. Now, when we read the Megillah, when you have it read to you, you don't actually have to read it yourself if it's read to you. And again, 2 times on Purim. The point of that mitzvah is really to hear the story told, and with an ear, you're hearing the story, you're listening to the story with an ear for those moments in the story, those parts of the story that are indicative of Hashem running the show. Hashem, God running the show. God runs the show. He's pulling the strings, and we're listening to the story to hear exactly the way that God is pulling the strings in the story. Okay. That's why the Purim puppet show, as opposed to making like a Passover puppet show, or a Hanukkah puppet show, or a Rosh Hashanah puppet show, or a Yom Kippur puppet show. That would be, I don't know what the Yom Kippur puppet show would be like exactly. We don't have puppet shows for those days. We do a Purim puppet show. And the puppet show is so apropos. The apropos Purim puppet show it's perfect for a Purim party. Practically speaking, because the point is to recognize that God pulls the strings. He is the puppeteer. We are the puppets. Life, we are all the puppets. God runs. He's pulling the strings like marionettes. You have kind of, you picture those marionettes, and you're holding the strings at the top, and the puppets are dancing below, and somebody is up above holding the strings. That's like the metaphor. God runs the strings. He runs the show. He pulls the strings in life. He's the puppeteer. And so we do a puppet. We do a puppet show. My wife and I have these puppets, and my mom made them many years ago. Each one of them is about 14 inches high, and we have about 8 of them. And it takes an 8-foot table to make the stage, and we have this big puppet show. We're planning on doing a nicely recorded video of the puppet show this year, so we could put it out there. So maybe I'll later on I'll be able to share the link, and you'll be able to see it. And it's about a 20-minute version of the real, of the whole story told in puppets. So one time many years ago, we were doing the Purim Puppet Show, and one of my colleagues from out of town came into town, and he was saying, this is such great education. You made a puppet show. You're teaching the story. You need to make puppet shows for all the holidays. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what? We're going to make the Yom Kippur puppet show? Like, I just didn't see it, okay, here are the puppets sitting in the sukkah. Ta-da! I just didn't see that being like so exciting. So there are no other puppet shows besides the Purim Puppet Show. Sorry, we're a one hit wonder. we have one puppet show, and that's it. And it's Purim. This is of all the different holidays, this is the one for a puppet show, because it's essential. So if we're reading through the Megillah, if we're gonna start with the story, frankly, it's not like, I could read the story to you, and every once in a while you'll say, oh, that must have been God at work, or, oh, there's one of those moments. Frankly, the idea is that with each and every line of the Megillah, in some way, there's some evidence to the fact that God runs the show in every line. So we're not going to have time to do that in-depth an analysis of every line of the 14 or 15 chapters of the Megillah. I don't remember how many chapters there are. We're not going to have time to do that on the show together, but maybe we'll at least go through some of the basic ideas, so you could get the sense of what we're talking about. Oh, there aren't that many chapters. Maybe there are only 10 chapters. So I was thinking of one of the other Megillahs, but I do want to just take a minute, and we could. So the story starts like this, and to set the stage for you, without needing any puppets at all, the story of the Megillah begins as the first Jewish temple is being destroyed. We say the first because there would be a second one after the Purim story. The Jewish people would be able to come back to Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple, and then we have what we call the second temple. It's the one and only, but rebuilt. Now, that took place something like 400 years before the Common Era, that the first temple was destroyed. It was destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. The king Nebuchadnezzar. He was the Babylonian king that sent his armies, his generals, to ransack, to destroy the temple, to exile the Jewish people, and they basically laid waste of Jerusalem and carted the Jewish people off to Babylon. That's where the first of our exiles were formally removed from the land of Israel by the Babylonians. Now, in a very short period of time, the Babylonian Empire had been replaced by the Persian Empire. And even though we were sent into exile by the Babylonians, very shortly thereafter, we found ourselves in the Persian Empire, because the Persians took over from the Babylonians. And meanwhile, we were still languishing in exile. This took only a short number of decades, in fact. The truth is, how many years was it? One could say it was exactly 70. I'll tell you why I know it's exactly 70 years. The Purim story begins with a party where the king of the Persian king at that day, who was Achashverosh, he's making a party. Now, why is he making a party? The Megillah doesn't really tell you why he's making a party. It just says he's celebrating and calling everybody together to appreciate his kingdom. But there's no real back explanation. The story, however, that we know from our history is that King Ahasuerus was well aware of a very famous Jewish prophecy, a prophecy that the exile of the Jewish people would be short-lived. In fact, that it would only last for 70 years. That between the time that they were carted off from the land of Israel till the time that exile would end and they'd be able to return and rebuild the temple was only going to be 70 years. Now, he was counting the 70 years, the king Ahasuerus, and according to his calculations, those 70 years had come and gone. And he was making a party because, in a sense, he was hoping to celebrate the fact that he thought what he thought had come to pass is that the prophecy was not going to come true. The Jewish people were not going to return to the land of Israel. They're not going to be rebuilding the temple because, as far as he had seen and counted, 70 years came and went. And he made a big party. And what did he do? He invited everyone to celebrate the fact that he was still in charge and the Jewish people were still his subjects. This party included, as the first lines of the Megillah discuss, it actually included the fact that some of the royal festivities included showing off all kinds of the royal vessels, which were the Jewish temple's vessels, which he had inherited from his predecessor. They were schlepped off, carted off, and taken back along with the Jewish people by the Babylonians, and that he had inherited. And the temple vessels were being used to celebrate at this party. Can you imagine that the Jewish people should not only have to watch this, but they even participated. They participated in this party. Now, that in and of itself is a crazy idea. Why would we be willing to celebrate a party? The reason for such was to celebrate the fact that the prophecy was not going to come to pass, and the Jewish people were not going to get to return to Israel, and our holy temple vessels were being utilized and shown off at this party, and the Jewish people were there participating. Now, what that did was, in a sense, it set into motion a series of events that would first bring about the threat of a total annihilation. The Jewish people were. It was like a tremendous debt was on a price was on our heads for doing that. And in heaven, they were out to get us. But ultimately, as we will go through and we'll see more from the story, that not exactly what King Ahasuerus had in mind came to pass. Because as we know, Hashem, God, is the puppeteer running the show, and we'll see how that works out in the end. The end, it worked out well for us, bad for him. The interesting tie-in with this week's parsha and next week's parsha is, of course, as we mentioned, Parshas Teruma is the story of the construction of the tabernacle, where these vessels are created. That's discussed in this week's parsha. Those vessels will eventually become to play out in the story of the Megillah itself, so many centuries and even over 1,000 years later. And just lastly, I think before we close for today, I want to share the truth is that the prophecy was correct. It would be only 70 years before the Jewish people would get out of exile and get to go back to build the temple. Why was Ahasuerus celebrating after according to his calculations, the 70 years had come and gone? He was mistaken. The Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel to Babylon, and later, which later became Persia, during two different waves of exile. And he was counting from the former, and 11 years later was the latter. And so he jumped the gun 11 years too early. And so he counted 70 years, but what he should have been counting is from the second wave of Jewish exile, which took place 11 years later. And therefore he was mistaken. So the prophecy did come to pass, but not according to his calculations. Just in case you ever are in the business of doing any calculations of Jewish prophecies, the trick is always to know when to start counting. Just so don't make Ahasuerus' mistake, just so you know. Meanwhile, we will. That's a little bit of the backstory of chapter 1, and as we'll see, that as we continue through the story, appreciating God the puppeteer, that'll be our job as we go forward, and we'll appreciate a little more of the parsha this week, and maybe even have a special mystery guest but I don't want to announce who that will be, and just in case it doesn't work out, because that's the way that guests sometimes work out on Live at 5. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. Folks, have a happy and a healthy day. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at this time on Live at 5.